Oh, I mean, it's just like I could watch this movie 100 times and get something different every time. Okay. Yeah, there we are. All right, so we gotta take that. Well, I didn't wear my Jaws shirt today, but I'm a huge Jaws fan, and it scared me of the ocean to the date, and nothing's ever done that before. Honestly, I don't feel deprived. I feel like I have too many options. I think it's gotta be Pulp Fiction, yeah. I really wanted to choose Reservoir Dogs, but it has to be Pulp Fiction. So it was my first experience being like, who's that director type deal.
Yeah.
I'm Stephen Schloss, writer, director, producer, cinematographer, and these are my desert island picks. You were watching the Film Stock podcast.
All right, guys, my name is Matthew Beltz. You're watching the Film Stock Podcast. Today we've got director Stephen Schloss. So I want to get right into it. You've had a very busy couple of years. I think, would that be safe to say?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Because when we met, this was a long time ago, but we worked on 2 music videos together with Devin Bussey, who is a videographer, cinematographer, gypsy by trade. And on that, you were the cinematographer for both of those music videos. But at the same time, you, which I understand you still have, your commercial enterprise, Schloss Films. So it was right around the time that we met that you kind of went full tilt boogie and said, all right, it's time to start doing some narrative shit. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, yeah, spot on.
Yeah. And I feel like I had the pleasure of being at the forefront of that with you, which was super inspiring. So that brings us to writer's block. What can you tell me about writer's block?
Yeah, writer's block was like, it was just so much anger and so much like frustration let out in a single piece of content that I possibly like couldn't have done without like 8 to 10 years of just enduring the commercial work, working for clients, doing the thing that I didn't want to do, but like still like trying to figure out how to master that thing. And then just realizing like, damn, I'm so lost in the sauce that like I just completely forgot like why I got into this. Like, what do I want to do? I felt like I was getting like sucked in. I took pride in the fact that I wasn't a 9 to 5er, didn't do corporate jobs, like wasn't going in the same office. And then like, I was doing this corporate work. I was in an office. I was looking at them, and I was like, we're doing the same shit. We're both selling out to a certain extent. I am calling myself a filmmaker, but I am not making films. I'm not a filmmaker. I am like a videographer at this point, right? And that's something that it's a tough pill to swallow. Like nobody who wants to think of themselves as an aspiring filmmaker wants to call themselves a videographer. It's like an offensive, derogatory name.
Yeah.
And so like being honest with myself and like actually being like, okay, like this is actually where you are. This is like who you are, unless like you do something. Like you have potential, but like I've always believed I had potential, but I also like couldn't lie to myself anymore that I was like proving that I actually did.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Sure.
So, it's kind of like there's some things that you do that you would never do again because you're like, that is so aggressively like just, out of control, expensive.
And you're talking about writer's block.
I am. Yeah. I'm talking about like when you have all this built up like energy that hasn't been like properly sort of just like distributed amongst your work, then you end up with something that's just like this explosion of aggression, which I think is like good and bad. I think it's like cathartic, it's therapeutic, but it also is like, damn, I've waited way too long. On the flip side, it's like, but was waiting so long the reason why I was able to make something with so much passion, or is this something that I can continue to do and draw from other means, even though the emotion might not be as strong and as built as it once was? And that was always like the question. And for a while, like once you make something and it's like your baby, and it's like typically like your first thing is like your baby. I think a lot of like filmmakers would go through this with like your first piece, and you'd say like, that's my favorite piece. Like that's
I'm not cutting a single fucking shot out of this thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Like it's gonna be exactly this way, and like I'm never gonna make anything better. Like this is the best thing that is ever gonna happen. And it's like, well, I think it just like holds always a special place to you. And I think the hardest thing is if you make something and people like it and you think it's good, to then say, I'm going to go make another thing, even if I don't believe that it is as good as the last one, like I'm still going to do it.
You got to keep moving. You got to keep growing. It's like, okay, it might not, this next project might not be what that was, but if you're chasing that goal
Yeah.
of being a filmmaker, you've got to keep at it. So with Writer's Block, for anybody that hasn't seen it, that's going to be watching this, I mean, what would your log line be? What would you distill that movie down to? Because I felt the anger that you were going through. I had the lucky position of being the producer on that, and like we had a lot of late night talks about what you were doing in the commercial world, how long you had kind of been on the back burner, so to speak, of your narrative career, and kind of hearing you talk about that and then bursting right into it. Like, I think it happened over like a 2-week period where you're like, well, I had this idea, I wrote this idea, we're moving on it. So what was the idea?
Yeah, the idea was basically, I was sitting down just like what do I want my first film to be? And I was struggling so hard to find that. And I sort of just thought about what that felt like for me, and I just like was like, this is exactly how it feels.
Mm-hmm.
As I'm like, picking my fingers and doing all my nervous habits, and it really just started as like, this is what I'm experiencing right now. Like, let me just like write about that. Like,
Kind of a sense of claustrophobia, if I may. Like, you kind of felt
yes.
boxed in and like all of this shit was going on inside. Is
Yep.
that fair to say?
Absolutely. Like living in the same spot in Boston for 8 years, great
Yep.
spot, small.
Yep.
It's my living and workspace. So, there is a sense of entrapment in there and not ever being able to really leave it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's definitely like experience in the character and the story. Very metaphorically, I would say, in terms of like, this is not reality, but this is like
100%.
an ethereal type situation.
Yeah. So it's about a guy in a room. Would you call it a prison?
I would call it's his own prison. Yeah. So it's about a guy who is forced to write to appease someone else, but also himself at the same time, and it's about what that experience feels like.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the experience was writing for clients and disagreeing with clients, but still being like, but this is it. This is like the best version of like it for you, and like them not being satisfied and you not being satisfied. And it's just kind of this like, it's this like torturous experience. If you do care and you do give a shit, it's torturous. If you don't,
you could write tags all day if you don't give a shit.
You could write tags all day. I don't think you're gonna be like very good at it, but I think that I just became very sensitive to it and just wanted to look at it in a way where I was just angry at myself.
Yep.
For just like sort of not giving myself like the chance or the opportunity or like having the balls to just be like, I'm gonna make something and I don't know if I'm good at making it because I haven't made a narrative piece yet.
Sure. Sure. But you definitely came armed with the skills of cinema. I mean, it's...
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at, I know that the commercial world can be like mentally and physically taxing in so far as like, you're not putting out your best artistic work. It might not be speaking to what's going on inside of you. It might not be getting it out there. But even looking back at your commercial work, it looks great. Like, you clearly are a skilled technician. So to then kind of see you add your own brand of storytelling to it, and then everything that on a cinematic level was pretty fucking badass. I mean, can you talk about the actual shoot? Can you talk about like how you imagined this whole thing? Because it's a wild ride. It's an absolutely wild ride. What is it, like 10, 12 minutes?
No,
somewhere
it's
in there?
8 minutes.
It's only 8 minutes.
It's about 7 minutes before credits too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think that the camera is still for more than like,
No.
I don't know, a couple of frames before the thing goes
There's a few
haywire.
statics just to like let things breathe, but yeah, it was the idea started as I was going into the winter. I actually
keep that mic about a fist from you. There you go. Yeah. So you were going into the winter.
Going into winter of 20, was it 21?
Oh Jesus, no, I think it would have been
22.
22.
Going into the winter of 22. So it was 2021.
No, because it was Writer's Block. It was Odessa and Kill That Man. So that would have been 23.
Okay, so going into the winter of 23, I was thinking about what I needed from my reel, to get like better commercial work. Like I wasn't satisfied with what I was doing.
Sure.
Felt like it was replaceable. And so I'm thinking about all these different concepts of like, all right, let me make like a spec commercial. Like, let me do something that's gonna show my skills. And I was like, why am I going to be like putting energy and money into doing the thing that I don't actually love doing,
Yeah.
as
Just to
opposed
get the
to
next job or
just to get the next job and
whatever.
not be satisfied with that.
Yep.
And so it started as like, what do I want to do with the camera that I haven't done before?
And you're like, everything.
Everything.
Bring it
like,
on. Give me the
I haven't been
360.
able to zoom,
Yep.
haven't been able to like build a 360 dolly track, like haven't been able to like play with blood and like explode blood in the way I wanted to, and just haven't been able to work with like my friends as actors like so much, like friends who I've had like big past experiences with, like in terms of like building my career and stuff. So
Sure.
all of the things kind of just like pointed me in the direction to be like, oh, this is like what I should be doing. And it was like the space away from being busy and working that allowed me to recognize, man, like I should be making like horror. Like
Yeah.
that's like I've always loved, violence and action video games. Like my first video game was like Resident Evil 2,
Of course.
which was amazing. It was
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
fixed perspective maps and just, I was so into blood and gore as a kid.
Yeah.
And I just like didn't do anything with it,
And then it's like you overcompensated on writer's block where it's like, let's just drench the whole
Yes,
room.
yes.
Like there's not going to be a clean panel in this room
Mhm.
by the end of it.
Nope.
No. So what was it like? Obviously we had a lot of people on that project. I mean, I remember talking to you about locations and, logistics of, parking and, how long we're going to film this thing, but who else was involved and what kind of conversations did you have with them?
So, I met this guy, Sammy, who's super interesting character. I actually met him at a dog park.
Okay.
And he had a really interesting background. He was like, he, wrote in his free time. He had written like a feature, and we just like shared like very similar personalities and taste.
Mhm.
And like we never really found anything to work on together. And like we were trying to work on some stuff, but like just like didn't really work out. And then a couple months later, I was like, based on his experience, I was like, hey, like, you write poetry.
Mhm.
Is this something that you'd be interested in like collaborating with? Like, this character has some things that I haven't experienced that I think that you have experienced. And I think together we can like make something that's real.
Sure.
And so that was my first like call, was like, Sammy, like, let's like, do you like this idea? Like, do you want to like collaborate and contribute to it? And he was like so down for it.
And how long was the writing process between kind of that initial conversation?
About like a month.
About a month.
Yeah, about a month. I had the idea brewing for like a year or so. Just like in like a Google Docs like thing of just like, here are these ideas that I'm not going to pursue, but I want to write down.
Sure. But when you finally pulled the trigger, you guys were able to do it pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of, it's funny. It was in spirit of writer's block. Like I put this like deadline on it for no fucking reason.
Yeah.
I was just like, yeah, let's do this like in like January, February, where it's like not busy. What do January? I think it was like January 16th. I think we shot.
It would have been mid to late January because then we quickly turned around and did Odessa.
And you came to me with Odessa first.
I did.
And then I was like, damn, you're doing something. Like, fuck, I need to do something too. I was like, we're gonna do this before.
Yeah.
And like it like was in my head, it was small. It was like, oh yeah, we're just gonna do it in like this cabin. It was like a skinny dude, and it wasn't like ethereal. There wasn't a ton of blood. And then I was like, no. This only works if it's like over the top because of how just the subject matter of it. Like it can't be too serious type deal.
It's definitely got like a nice there's a sci-fi dystopian element to it, but the thing that I really latched on, because when you came to me with the idea, again, like you said, we had been talking about getting you on to be the director of photography for Odessa, and we had this wild stunt that was in it, and then you kind of brought this idea to me, and I just latched on to like immediately. I was like, okay, like this means something to him. Like I kind of felt that anger that you had been experiencing over 10 years just kind of built up. And as you were describing like all the blood gags and like the intensity with which you wanted this thing cut together, I was like, okay, this is worth sleepless nights. This seems like it could be a lot of fun and like very creatively rewarding, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So then, the writing took you about a month. We quickly turned around, got into a production meeting. So we had Carter Brooks on recently, and I brought up, how the first time I met him was on Writer's Block. And he told a funny little story that I wasn't aware of until he told it on the podcast. So can you confirm this? He said that you guys had been just doing a short film together, and that when we did a Zoom meeting, we had like an early production meeting between, I think it was you, me, and Jordan Pacheco, who did the special effects.
hmm
Uh, Carter wasn't involved at that time, and he thinks that he got the link to the production meeting by accident. So he just hopped on it, and then he realized this was happening. He kind of rolled with it. Is there truth to that, or
No,
he
Carter
was always he was
on.
always involved? Because I couldn't
Yeah.
imagine that project
Yeah,
without him.
yeah, Chris was always involved.
Okay,
Like
good.
he was always, as soon as there was a door in the movie, which there was a door very like early on, like Chris was involved.
Yeah.
like
Okay.
like as soon as it was like, wait, there's a door here,
Mm-hmm.
it was like, yeah, Chris is involved.
Because him finding the desk, which at the time of kind of the early conversations we had, I didn't realize how much of a set piece that was. That
Oh
was
my
much
God.
that was much less like a prop and more like a set piece.
Oh yeah.
And
And
him
that was not written in. That was just
No.
like a Chris was like, yo, how about this? And I was like, oh my,
check this out. It
I was
flips
like,
open.
oh my God.
Yeah,
Like,
we gotta
you could
have
never
this.
think about that. Like that
And then
makes the movie.
And then his whole design of the jail cell, and
Mhm.
between you and him collaborating on the paint and the colors. I mean, he clearly was integral.
Oh yeah.
And then there was obviously Jordan. What were your conversations like with Jordan? I mean,
Pacheco?
when you came to him about that, was he like, oh, this is right up my wheelhouse, or like, this is
Well,
gonna
so
be a fucking nightmare?
I think he thought I was fucking crazy, which
Sure.
I truly was like, yes, I deserve that. Like,
Mhm.
but give me a chance. Like, trust. Like,
Let me
I
explain
I
myself.
actually got to figure it out.
Yeah.
But I also like was cool about knowing, like, explaining that I didn't know what I didn't know, and that I
Mhm.
was leaning on him for those things, and that's where Jordan was able to bridge such a nice gap between like me and Chris, and have the experience of like what that would take to actually make happen.
Sure.
Where it's like, here are the ideas, here's like the labor, here's like what we think, and then Jordan's like, yeah, but like I've done this before, and like here's what I would do to like the pole and all these things that like you can never think of.
Hmm.
But Jordan thinks from such like a his perspective is so interesting, because he's such a storyteller at heart, that he's not just he's asking the questions about the characters to figure out the special effects.
Yeah.
Not not just ask about the shot or the vision, but like, but who is this character, and like how did they cut their arm, and like which way would the blood pull, or
Sure.
really like caring about like the authenticity of like the effect, which I didn't want it to be like, I wanted it to start like, okay, here's real, like this is, let's like get on people's skin, and then like let's go to a place where it's like, oh, this is fun, like this
Mhm.
is like I can watch this, and like I don't know what's happening next, but also it's like this clearly isn't like normal blood at this point.
No, it definitely has kind of a Tarantino theatricality about it, which I think is a good thing. It's over the top. It's clearly over the top to emphasize a point, and to get that wild, angry vision out of your head and onto the screen. What do you think was the most difficult special effect that the team collectively had to do? Jordan himself included, obviously.
It's crazy because the difficult ones we didn't experience any difficulty with. Like I
No, we
think,
got those in like one take.
which was insane, because like three things needed to happen and they all happened perfectly. Like, Mike, the actor, he had to strike himself at a given time
With a cleaver.
with a cleaver or a knife, or a blade or whatever have you, right?
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
A little bit of spoiler alert, but it has been out there for a while now. It's
Sure.
been doing well on the festival circuit, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. But so yeah, it was those gags, like the 360 gags. We just nailed them. Like
Yeah.
we were just synced up. I think it was like 1:30 a.m. and I think everybody was just in that zone of like, I'm not even thinking. I'm just, there's like just energy in this room that I'm responding to, and like we've all been here together. We all know each other. Like it just was so synced up. And out of those, I think we did like 10 different like blood gags, and like one of them didn't make it in. And I was
Yeah.
expecting to have like way less because of just the 3 things that had to happen, and they were all delayed. You know, like the dolly had to be in place, Mike had to hit, and Chris had to hit his pneumatic
Yep.
underneath the desk, which was hilarious. Like just
Yeah.
like, 6-foot Chris underneath this desk, and Mike, 6-foot Mike like above the desk, just like 2 of the hugest humans, like just getting the smallest they can be.
Yeah.
And it was just like all timed perfectly, and like none of the timing was really rehearsed. Like we rehearsed it twice, and we were like, all right, let's do it. Like we're gonna paint the walls.
Mhm.
You get one chance of this, and it was just like, fuck it, hey, that was good. Like we watched playback, and we were just like,
Wow, we got it.
moving on,
Yeah.
moving on, moving on.
Yeah, that was crazy. Even though we took all the precautions in that space to make sure that it, didn't wind up on the walls or the ceiling. It's like you
Come
can't,
on.
you even in your best laid efforts, you can't protect against all that blood. No. It was badass though.
I did not. I was ignorant to how difficult it would be to get the bad blood off the walls.
Well, that
Because
was
we chose like 3 different types of blood.
We did. But what ended up being, because I remember, we had a quick turnaround between when we wrapped the production and when we had to get the set that we had rented from the Pawtucket Armory. We had a very quick turnaround with, putting it back to the way it was. And there was something about the blood that was resistant to the paint.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like
It
we
had
did.
soap in it.
Is that what it was?
Yes. So there were 3 different types of blood. We knew we wanted like the expensive stuff in the close-ups.
Mm-hmm.
We knew we wanted the there was some blood that was going to be on his face,
Mhm.
right? Like we knew we wanted like certain blood for that. And then we also knew that we were going to have so much blood that like we couldn't afford to like spread the expensive blood across the boards. So then we like tiered it down, like, okay, blood that we're not showing up close, we'll just use this blood.
Mm-hmm.
Cheaper.
Sure.
Doesn't-
Cheaper.
Doesn't come off. Stains.
No.
You
The
know,
paint literally resisted.
Like made of like soap, like you'd paint like a thick layer, and then you'd sit there for like 5 minutes, and you would just watch the blood
Just come right through the fresh coat
Yeah.
of paint. I remember I had
It was
to
like a
call.
nightmare.
It was an absolute nightmare. I remember I called Dave. He was one of the scenic artists on a show that I had just wrapped on. I was like, buddy, like what's going on here? And he's like, oh, you fucked up. You fucked up big time. So he gave us some advice, and then luckily
He's like darker color.
Yeah, he gave us the advice of the darker color. Luckily, the location contact, he was like, I don't really give a shit. Just paint it so that it, looks fine.
It doesn't look like blood.
Yeah, it doesn't look like blood. So what was it, like a dark green color? But
It was a gross green color before. It was like an old office green that, like,
Yeah.
I don't know why you'd ever want that.
I don't think anybody had been in there, in a couple of years.
That's
at
another
least.
story that, like, you don't give yourself enough credit for, but location wise, like that could not have happened in anywhere else besides that circular room.
No,
We
you're
were
right.
gonna do like this like warden hall, which was huge, and I
Yep.
was just being like, oh, it's gonna be fine. Like it's a huge space, but like we'll like deal with like these like 12 windows down the side and 12 windows on the left side. It's like, no, we won't.
No, we won't.
No, we won't.
Well, that was what was nice. I mean, we did it proper. I did. I think I scouted 3 locations. I was able to get like 3 solid options, and I think that we tech scouted 2 of them. And upon being in the first one, we're like we'll make it work. But in retrospect, getting to the second location, the Armory,
Mhm.
it was like that guy didn't give a shit. Like, you guys can go balls to the wall. As far as I'm concerned, you're paying for this space. Like, just
the Armory was where we ended up shooting,
the Pawtucket Armory is where we ended up shooting.
but we went to an armory right
We
before
went to
that.
the one. It was the Varnum Armory.
And he was like, you can't move this, you can't move that.
Well, it was
These are
all
set
like a
pieces."
historic museum.
I'm like, how are we gonna bleed all over this place?
Yeah. But where will the blood go?
Like I'm like not even allowed to like go over this rope.
Yeah. So it ended up being a really good thing that we ended up doing it proper in tech scouting, and
And
you
I'll
were able
never
to
forget,
kinda
you came to
lay
me.
it all out.
You're like, Steve, just like, I want you to look at it. Like,
Yeah.
just look at it. Like you
About
knew
the place we wound up.
the place we wound up. Like you like soft pitched it. Like you were just like, I think it's worth looking at. And I walked in and I was like, wow, these are high ceilings, and like this is a
Mhm.
circular room, and there's like this like weird room off to the side, so we have to deal with that. But like there's staging,
Mhm.
there's this,
Yeah, we
like
were self-contained quite
we
beautifully.
walked across the street,
Yep.
and they
We're
were
able to
like,
light from over there.
which didn't do anything. They weren't powerful enough.
Nope. Luckily, they didn't charge us, so I mean,
No.
there's that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We looked badass, setting up lights outside that like didn't read at all,
Yeah.
on screen, but like fuck it.
No, it ended up being a really good location. So, and I guess it's worth mentioning, like the lead actor, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
How do you? I know you've told me the story in the past, so forgive me. But for anybody that doesn't know, like, how do you know each other, and how did it come to be that he was the lead?
Yeah, so Mike and I have been working together since I've been working, basically. So, graduated BU in 2014. Got a job in a restaurant out of school as a food runner because I had no serving experience and was serving up. And I was on Craigslist every day.
Hmm.
Saw this like food show ad, like looking for like a cinematographer,
Hmm.
and applied to it. And then like a month later, heard back. Like I think something happened to their other cinematographer. Like I don't know what it was, but like moved or some shit. But they were like, "Hey, we need someone like tomorrow. Are you available?" And like I was like, "Yeah, sure." Like I, told them I had experience in food,
Sure, sure.
which I did.
Yeah, which I did at that point,
You
so it
know?
worked out. Yeah, I wasn't technically lying.
Yeah, no, not at all.
No.
And yeah, so we shot our first segment. I went hard as hell.
Mhm.
Made it as sweet as I could possibly make it. And Mike was a host on the show, and that was kind of the beginning of our friendship on the show. And then things about the show we like both disagreed with. We both were like, "Oh my god, they're like just so selling out. Like this is boring. No one's gonna watch this. Like we gotta spice it up." But like the show was very resistant to that. They were just like, no, we have this slot. Like, the sponsors like us, blah, 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 blah. And that like started my whole like being okay with doing the thing, even though there's a better way of doing it.
Sure.
Um, and Mike was experiencing that with me. So as I was coming up with this idea, like it started as like this like skinny, frail dude who like didn't eat and just like wrote to like, no, this is like a beast man. Like
Beast man, that's what we
this
called
is
him. That's right.
beast
Yeah.
man, dude. Like, which was heavily inspired by Grizzled Man.
Grizzman. Yeah.
Like Mike came into my mind when I read Odessa, and I was like, Grizzled Man. I was like, oh, dude, that's it, dude.
Yeah.
It's not like a fraudy dude. It's a
Yeah.
beast man, and he's beasted up.
Yeah. There's I mean I can't help but kind of pull correlations like between what's in your head and what eventually became it. It almost felt like with writer's block, it really did. It felt like you kicking open the door and being like, I'm fucking here.
Yeah.
And that's what I was getting at earlier, where it's like, since you kind of started, like once you decided that you're going on this narrative journey, I mean, I know you had been doing stuff prior. I'm not going to discredit any of that, but like since writer's block, I mean, fuck you, Odessa, Kill That Man, Katie's Skin. I know you DP'd for Cam Morton on Route 66,
44.
44. Thank you.
44. I did this three shorts for Paul Odgren.
Yep.
Shape of Money, which is premiering at the Lonely Seal.
Okay. Where's that?
Arlington, I think.
Okay.
Um and Black Harvest, which we won the best film for last year in the 48.
That's right. Yep.
Um
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you can't remember all of them is kind of getting to the point that I'm trying to make. It's like it's kind of inspiring in the way that, obviously you've still got your commercial work that you do, but once you decided, it's like, no, here I come.
which
Like,
is so bad because
I'm
I just like
committing.
and hopefully the clients aren't listening, but like I shortchanged the commercial work so much. I'm like the commercial jobs, I'm like I'm gonna wake up and like figure it out, and like these jobs are like taking up all the time and like don't pay anything.
I mean, that's probably also a testament to, your natural talent. I mean, every time you step on a set, sometimes I'm blown away with some of the stuff you're talking about by way of camera and lighting and
Thanks,
whatnot.
man.
So it's just like not to put words in your mouth, but I would imagine it's easier to phone in those jobs because they're generally less technical. They're less, narrative driven than some of the other stuff that you're working on, less stylized. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I want to wrap up on writer's block real quick, but like, what was the editing process like? Because that's a fuck of an edit, man.
Yeah. So for writer's block, what was crazy is we had sound for one day.
Oh yeah. We got our producer Alex Caimano here. He was the sound op. There wasn't a lot of sound on that.
No,
Like
so there
very
was sound
little.
one day, and it was the moment where the guard walks in, and I knew that there was gonna be like walking around and
With the
like,
new typewriter, right?
with a new typewriter, and things were gonna be happening that like we couldn't like replicate.
Yep.
But for all the other stuff, like I flew Mike in from Florida, so we didn't have like tons of days to rehearsal. Like
You did a lot of ADR for Mike, right? Like none
it
of that
was
was recorded on
all
set.
fully,
Yeah.
all fully, and then because there's no dialogue driven, like moments from him, grunts.
Yep.
Which
Yeah.
we knew were gonna happen, but like the grunts were done after.
And you ADR'd that to picture? So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. So we picture locked, we did Foley, we did score, and if you have something with no dialogue, like it's so musically driven that the music is the dialogue to a certain extent.
Sure. I remember yeah, I guess I'm going back to production real quick, but I just think it's like absolutely hilarious because I throughout our whole conversation in pre-production, like leading up to the actual shoot, I don't remember there being a guy with an eye patch in a different room. And like you pitched it to me, like I think it was like the middle of day 2.
Oh no, I'll tell you it. I'll tell you the moment. I'll never forget the moment. It, like
What, when you told me?
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was a moment that was just like sometimes fight for it, even if like sometimes like people don't see it type deal. And I think it was like 12:30. We had just done the final shot in the movie.
Which took us like an hour and a half.
Took us way longer
So
than
long.
it needed
Yeah,
to
yeah,
because
yeah.
there was like a lot that had to happen.
Yeah.
And it was a surprise, motherfucker.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't
Yeah.
like we were ready for that. It was just like
We're doing this.
Yeah, we went
Yeah.
outside. You had a cig. I smoked a joint,
Yep.
and you were like, "Steve, like, do we need to ever see? Like, I don't think we need to see back there."
It didn't make sense to me. I didn't know who this character was. I didn't know why we needed a guy in an eye patch in a suit,
Yeah.
smoking and reading all this.
It's so ridiculous.
It didn't make sense to me, but I think, it's one of those weird things that having seen the final product, it's one of those things that, it wouldn't have made sense without it.
Yeah.
Like it would have been fine without it, but having it there and realizing how little time it actually took us to film it, I'm like, well, thank God we got it.
I
Like,
think I
seriously.
conceded on a couple things because I knew like I was gonna have to pull a card where I was like, no, we have to do this.
Yeah.
And it was one of those like we were outside and you're like, Steve, like I feel like you're losing the crew. And I was like, fuck, am I losing the crew? Like,
And he's like, I might be losing the crew.
I was like, shit. I was like, well, I know what this last scene takes, and like I can just stay here and like do it like
Yeah.
myself.
Credit to the crew though. I'm pretty sure for the most part we all stuck
Nobody
around.
left.
Nobody left.
Nobody left.
I think it might have been like one person, but it was because they just did the makeup and then it was like, okay, we're
I
good.
think it was. Yeah, I think there was no more gore for sure.
There's no more gore, so I think Jordan and his teammates were able to take off. But
That's
like,
right.
yeah, for the most part, everybody ended up staying.
Everyone stayed, and I was like, guys, it's cool. Like, we got this. And it was a totally different setup, like pretty much a new location.
New location, new lighting schematics,
Kind of
wardrobe
banged it out in like
change.
2 hours.
It couldn't have been more than 2 hours, but yeah, everything that you got in that second set, even though it's sparsely cut throughout, like it kind of gets to, again, I'm seeing the correlations in your own life, but like it's like how you probably felt in the commercial world, where it's like,
here's this asshole over here.
here's this asshole being like,
who's like kind of myself. Like it's just like
watching over, like making sure the work's getting done, like
never being satisfied.
never being satisfied. So I'm really glad in retrospect that you held your guns on that and we got it, because I don't know what the short would be without it. But yeah, that was cool. That was really cool. And Mike playing another character too. Can't beat it.
Oh, he loved it too.
Yeah.
It's going him back. He had to shave. Like,
Yep.
He's got this whole story. So when he went back to his motel, he was all bloody because like it
Drenched
was
in blood.
after like the last shot where it's just like shower.
Because we had to send him back.
We had to send him home to shave and change
and shower and get back for the last shot.
And he had been saving his beard for like a month and a half to look like
the Beast Man.
Beast Man.
Yeah.
So he went back. He shaved. We had the eye patch. We had the pretentious lighter.
Yep.
You know, he
Yep.
loved it.
I still think I have that, by the way.
And so, do you really?
I think so.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Keep it.
Yeah, I'll keep it.
Yeah. And he forgot his room key to get
Mhm.
into this motel. It was like a $60 a night motel, like in Pawtucket. So I could only imagine, right?
Yeah.
He ever gets his room key, he's banging on the door, and mind you of what he looks like, just have a vision. He's
He
just
looks like he just murdered a bunch of people.
at least like 3 to 4,
Yeah.
and like bathed in their blood.
Yeah.
So he's banging the door, and like the woman like comes, like the motel owner, and it's just like, you forgot your room key again,
Mm-hmm.
and lets him in.
Mm-hmm.
No questions asked. And Mike was like, I don't know if I even want to like come into this place. Like they didn't challenge me. Like they didn't question.
They
the
don't
fact.
want to know anything about this.
Yeah, like this is fine. Like you see this regularly. Like that's cool. Like just let this man in type deal.
Yeah.
And that was like a story that I was so like just like lost in the sauce at the time, where I was just like, wow, like whatever, like let's shoot it.
Yeah.
And then you stop to think, and you're just like, wow, that's so ridiculous. Like
there isn't anything about that short film that's not ridiculous, from its like inception to its execution to the final product. So, I mean, looking back on it, obviously, you're more than a year removed from it now. I mean, you talked earlier about the first short kind of being the one, you hold yourself to the highest standards. But I mean, what do you think about it all this time removed? Did it do what you wanted it to do?
absolutely, yeah. I think that what I really like about it is it didn't have a purpose other than like the purpose that it served, which was to like make something.
Yep.
I wasn't like trying to pitch a feature. I wasn't trying to be like, this is gonna make my career, or this is something that's gonna like lead me to the next thing. It's just like, I want to make this.
Mm-hmm.
Just like a purely like just selfish, kind of
desire to get what's inside out.
Mhm. And I think what I learned from that was just like, do that more.
Yeah.
Like it might seem like it doesn't make any sense. It's not marketable. You're not thinking about your audience, but like I think if your audience is you, and you have taste, and you're pretty just like, this is how it's gonna be, and like this is what I want, then I think you're gonna end up with something that other people feel strongly about also.
Sure.
As opposed to like, what do they want? What do they want? And like, ending up with like a dog's breakfast, where it's like somewhere in the middle of like everything, and it's just not like really true to anything at its core.
Sure. Yeah, we have this debate. We've had this debate a few times now with a few of the guests, and it's like, when you go into making a project, whether it's a feature or short or whatever, music video, there is this thing in your head where it's like, well, it's going to be out there. Are people going to like it? But it seems so far the consensus is that you got to make it for yourself. You've got to be the audience. Like it's got to be something that you would sit down and watch and pour your love into, and only then would it actually translate into something that other people would want to see. And that's kind of a category that I personally put myself in. Like it's got to be something that you would watch.
Yeah.
Tastemaker, not a taste follower, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Exactly, because everybody can watch YouTube and like learn the rules and learn like what's trendy, but like not a lot of people can just like pull out like raw emotion and just like put it on screen and be like, yeah, this is like, I don't give a fuck what you think actually.
Yeah.
And it's cool because like that for me, I did like a 48-hour before.
Which one was that? Was that the one that takes place in the house, kind of sci-fi vibes? What was the name of that?
Presence. Which is funny because Sonnenberg just like came out with a Presence, and it's like same concept, and I'm like,
oh, get out, really?
Yeah.
You're like, I did it first, motherfucker.
Yeah, I was like, fuck, dude, you saw that, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. You owe me residuals, actually.
Yeah, asshole.
Yeah. So Presence was before Writer's Block.
And that was for like, yeah. And that was like, this is for a jury, and this had to be made in 48 hours. So I'm like, I'm not really making it for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what do people want to see? What is this? And it's just like, it's so convoluted because it's not like really being true to any one thing. It's trying to like appease a lot of things, and then you just end up with just like a a mess, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah, it's funny to hear you say that that film was a mess because, we've talked about it a lot. So I see what you're looking at and how you're coming to that conclusion. But the first time I received it, completely unbiased, like, didn't even know it was a 48. I was like, oh shit, like, this is really good. It's well shot. Like, you have a lot of characters in that project. And
That's the issue. Next project, one character.
yeah, writer's black, only one.
I was
And
like,
he's
shit,
gonna play two
I did
characters.
too much there. Like, let's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
scale it back, you know?
Let's roll it back. Well, the next directorial project that you got yourself up to, which was actually more recent, was Katie's Skin, and you went from one character to two.
Mm-hmm.
What was the process like there?
Had two people to work with.
I just
Fantastic.
got two people. It was fun.
Two people who wanted to do something and just like, all right, what do we have? Like, what's available? It was we were both coming off of like fairly expensive films that we each like funded.
And who were the other people that you're talking about?
Rosario and Emily.
Okay.
And basically like we had just worked together on 44. They were producers. Cam Morton directed.
Yep.
And
You were a cinematographer.
Yep. They were like other people in this area who were trying to like make films and like collaborate with people. And I just done writer's block, and I just spent like all of my money on that. They just spent all their money on this, and it's kind of like let's like put our money together and make something, but like we don't want to spend a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just want to make something because I have this other idea that's going to be expensive later on down the year.
Sure.
So like, but if I don't make anything, I'm just gonna like get depressed and like down on myself. So like, let's just like make something, just to like keep making something.
Sure.
I really wanted to have like a film in the circuit this year. So like last year was Writer's Block, and it's still going through the festival circuit. And I think it's so important to be relevant and not make a film like every other year, but like just always be there.
Mm-hmm.
Just with like the market and content creation, and it doesn't have to be your baby concept, but like just go and do something and surprise yourself and challenge yourself with something. And that's exactly kind of what this film was taking a step back from like writing and creating the whole thing and being like, I'm gonna direct this and I'm gonna steer it in the direction that I want to
Mm-hmm.
see on screen based on like the story that is like, given essentially.
Sure. Well, it was a very interesting short, especially coming off of writer's block for a bunch of different reasons. One, it's almost entirely dialogue driven. Like, yes, there is some, horror, there are some, action moments, but it's almost entirely dialogue driven. And then the other thing that I find interesting about that particular project, and you've expressed this to me before, was, well, we pulled out every stop in writer's block, by way of a 360 zooms, Dutch angles, like whatever. And with this, I remember you telling me that you wanted to kind of restrict yourself and be able to tell a story through still images.
Mm-hmm.
And damn it, you did that. I mean, there's no camera movement, but it's so engaging. I mean, you've got a lot of good coverage. All the framing is great. The lighting is awesome. So like, why that? Was it just to push yourself into
Yeah.
kind of a uncomfortable territory?
Yeah, it's like, I mean, this is the way I look at shorts are reps.
Mm-hmm.
With anything you do without repetition, like you're not gonna get any better.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exercising a muscle, so to speak.
exercising a muscle that like you're afraid to use,
Sure.
or like you haven't used, or like you don't know if it works. And I've always steered away from dialogue because I felt like I wasn't good with dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like dialogue was the first thing in like a low budget film or short that would take you out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to like lean into that and be like, okay, like if someone's gonna give me money, like the money that I want for a film, like I need to prove that I can do dialogue and I
Sure.
can make a scene interesting that's not expensive. And so that was really the challenge of just like creating pacing and beats and making sure that there were moments within the story that we're gonna keep the beats moving and keep the audience guessing, and doing it through pacing and timing as opposed to look at this, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
really like taking the camera out of the picture and being like, all right, I'm gonna direct this
Mm.
and like set the camera down and like that's where it's gonna be. And there's gonna be like 3 moments where we zoom in.
Sure.
but the camera's not moving. It's not going on a dolly. Like, it's not that we didn't have a dolly. It's just that, like, I know the dolly works.
Hmm.
I know what the dolly does.
I know how to use the
I
dolly.
know that to use a dolly. Like, I don't know how to, like, do this without, you know, moving the dolly.
Sure. Sure. Did you find it to be a rewarding experience?
Totally. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that, I think what it taught me was that, like, there were so many instincts in me of being like, oh, this should be a push in, like, now this should be this, this should be that.
Hmm.
And it was just stick to the game plan, like stay true to the brief. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Which, like, is something I pulled from, like, commercials. And I think that the big thing that I wanted to go for was, like, lensing and making sure that I wasn't using comfortable lens options that I know work,
Mhm.
and covering the scene in both an aspect ratio and then lens choice that was, like, abnormal, that was gonna give it a look, that had its own rules built in. You know, like, I wanted, like, these frontals on, like, a 31, and I wanted our wide on an 18,
Mhm.
and I wanted our overs on a 25, which were just, like, across the board different from what I would typically do. Like, the rules that I would tell someone or teach somebody, like, who would ask the question, I would tell them, like, this will work if you do, like, your 50 and a 75 here or
Sure.
whatever. But as soon as you start breaking those, you have to really think about, like, I know what this does, and so I know how to compensate for it, and I know, like, what that means. And having enough, like, confidence to just kind of, like, stick to that and not, like, resort to what is for sure gonna work, but, like, having a little faith in the pre-production.
Sure. Sure. And in regards to pre-production, I mean, from the credits, it looks like Rosario wrote the script. Is that true?
Yep.
And then Rosario and Amelie, they were both the actors
Mhm.
in the project. I mean, did you feel kind of reinforced because their acting's awesome? I mean, I've known Rosario for a long time, and like we flirted with the idea of like doing something together, but we never have.
Mhm.
But like just interacting with him on a day-to-day basis, I'm like, I know it's there.
Mhm.
Like I know that he specifically has talent. So to actually see him in front of the camera in a role that like, he gets to play around with the dialogue and he gets
Mhm.
to play with these different scenarios. I mean, what was that like working with them? Was there a comfort level because you had just come off of Route 44? Was there a comfort level because they wrote the script? Like, did they bring things to it that you hadn't thought of, or was it a very like what was that process
It was,
like?
like, both. It was, we're writing the script, like, you're writing the script, we're making this movie.
Hmm.
You are the characters, like, let's lean into, like, what is gonna make you look good.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, like, basically the whole dining room scene was, like, written, and then I was like, dude, I know the first, like, line that you're gonna come in with, and that's
Yeah.
gonna show your character, and that's gonna set you up for, like, being more than what it is before.
Yep.
And, like, it's like just like putting, like, a little, like, hey, just, like, let's say this first, like, type deal. Like, I'm not writing it, but, like, your character should say this first, and then you're gonna be so much more of, like, a character than, like, just the written George.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it was a lot of fun, like, working with the person who was, like, writing it, because it's like, no, like, let's lean into your strengths. Like, you know who you are. We know what reads. There's something about both of those people that turns on when the camera's in front of them. Like, they have a presence to them.
100%.
And so it's like, let's lean into that. Like, you guys are the people. Don't try to do something that's not within you.
Hmm.
Like, let's write to your strengths. And there's, like, a couple moments from Rosario that I was like, I didn't ask for that. Like, couldn't have asked for that. And, like, that is it.
Yeah.
And same with, like, Am. It was just like, oh my God. Like, like, that was, like, could have never, like, thought that would happen or, like, told you to do that. And, like, that's it. And that's the freedom that you give someone when you, like, lean into. And I think this is, like, a thing about, like, I would say indie filmmaking that everybody should do is
What's
keep in
that?
mind of your actors and
Sure.
write to their strengths. Like, if you know who your actor is gonna be, don't write outside of who they are and, like, what they're capable of. Like, lean into what they're capable of,
Hmm.
and then you're gonna get something that's, like, truly them and feels just, like,
Organic,
special.
yeah, kind of pops on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
That's fun, man.
Yeah.
That's fun.
I've never worked that way before. I've never, like, been like, hey, we're doing this. Like, this is purely resource based. Um, Rosario's mom, Max,
Yep.
love her.
Yeah.
She, we were scouting his house, and we're like, we're not gonna spend any money on this thing. Like, let's use your mom's house, and like, let's use like this basement that your sister has, and like, let's just do that thing. And I go there on the scout, and I'm like, maybe this works. Like, let's move that chair. And I'm just like, I don't know, guys. Like, you wouldn't live here. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we can color your hair, we can pepper it, but like, you wouldn't live here. Like, let's go like talk to Max and go up and talk to Max. Tell her like, what I'm looking for. I tell her like it's gotta be like this green, like eclectic, like older, like think like 80s, like rom-com, sitcom type of
Mhm.
like location. And she's like, nothing's coming to mind. And we're walking down the stairs and going around, and it's like this big staircase. We get halfway through, and she goes, I got it. She calls up from the upstairs, and I'm just like, what? She's like, says whoever's, the homeowner's name is. And Rosario's like, oh shit, she does have like a kind of a cool house.
So you didn't end up going with Rosario's house, or
No.
his parents' house, rather?
No.
No.
Couldn't.
No.
It was like one of those things where it's like, let's just shoot this, and like we'll never, this will just be a fun exercise to like Max being like, no, I have the space. And she shows me the pictures. I'm like, yeah, that's the space. That's actually exactly what I described.
Was it a family friend? Was it
Family friend?
Yeah.
And I'm like, does she know what this means?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
like we're
That's
gonna come in,
yeah.
like we're cooking chicken, like
Yep.
you know what I mean?
Well, that's the thing. So, as you know, my background is in locations. Like, yes, I've directed short films and whatnot, but like career wise, I'm in locations, and that's what I always try and I try and set the homeowner up with the worst possible scenario, where it's like, guys, like when the film crew rolls in,
We own.
we own. Like, this isn't going to be, it's not going to feel like your house. Like, you'll have a fun time if you go in expecting that to be the case. And generally, once you do that, they're like, oh, it's not nearly as bad as you brought it, you made it seem. So that's awesome that you were able to kind of work with a family friend and take over their house. I mean, there is a nice, I hate to say this because I've got such mixed opinions about David Lynch, but you can't deny he's got a style. There was something like Lynchian about the setting and the lighting where it just feels like kind of surreal, but like there's an unease.
Yeah, that's my vibe.
Underneath the whole surface of it.
Yeah.
And if that's what you were going for, it was really well done.
Yeah, that's the vibe.
Can I ask you about the basement scene? I mean, well, I guess I want to ask you a couple of things. There's a lot of where writer's block is concerned, you guys went over the top heavy with your special effects, blood, etc. In this project, you have special effects, violence, stabbing.
Way to give it all away.
No. It's fine. There's a lot going on. Don't even worry about it. I'm not telling them how it all happens, but you've got shit going on. And what was it like working on a smaller level, but at the same time, like a compliment to you, it actually looks legit. Like, I won't point out certain moments in case you are afraid of spoilers, but there are quite a few things in there, especially toward the end, where I was like,
yeah,
brother.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
That was kind of the idea of like, writer's block. I wanted people to be immune to it by the end, and then just like amp it up. Where this one, I wanted it to play on tropes, expectations of like, oh, I know what this means, and like, oh fuck, like
I didn't know what that meant.
I didn't think you were gonna go there.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something to say about like movies where you don't see it coming and you're not prepared. I don't believe in being too hidden with the fact that something's going to happen. I still think that you should build a vibe and an energy, and what you're calling out is this uneasiness in the atmosphere, like building this atmosphere of just what lens you're choosing and how close you're putting the camera to person. And for this film, I didn't go above like a 40 millimeter because I just wanted to be like, I wanted to feel this uncomfortable closeness. There's two over shoulders because of just like how close the people that they are, but everything else is in a single. And because of that, you can just lens like wider and be closer in a large format, which just makes you feel just like weird. And there's certain things that I would do typically, like to block characters and lighting to like dial it into perfection. And I kind of went like 95% of the way there and then just started pulling back and like got to like 87% of just like, this isn't quite right. This isn't like this passes. Like, this is great. Like, you're not gonna point out any flaws in it, but like, she's not really centered, or like that, like something in the background feels like weird or off, and like, it's not like calling attention to itself, but it's a vibe that's like underneath the image that you're like, it's resonating with you and you're feeling it, and you're not able to say like, "Oh, I could tell by the way that they were shooting that thing that like that was gonna happen." It's like, no, you fucking couldn't. Like you just felt awkward. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, I mean, kudos to Rosario as the writer, but it was a very unique script, and the title of it, you know where you're going to some degree, and I think this is probably more because I know you. It's like, okay, that title, Schloss, something's gonna get pretty fucked up and dark.
The title was called first was called Limerence, and then it was called Flay. And then after the first day of shooting, I was like, "Yo, Rosario, put Katie's skin on the next call sheet because
Yeah,
like
it's
it's not Flay."
it's obvious,
Yeah,
and
it's like intriguing enough, hopefully, to be like, I'm trying to build a brand of like, if you know me and if you saw the first thing, then you're almost like, if you look at this as a feature format, like you're almost like waiting for the thing to happen. It's like, okay, where's the fucked up thing happening?
sure.
And
And
like,
that's something that you've been more deliberately chasing. I remember us talking about, right? It's, you've always been obsessed with horror. That's something that you're deliberately putting yourself out there to kind of strive to, kind of put your footprint on, so to speak. Is that fair to say?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not gonna see like Gone with the Wind by Steve Schloss anytime soon. And if we do, there's gonna be like
Sorry, I've like undergone a transformation
yeah, yeah,
of
yeah.
some
Yeah,
sort.
yeah, yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. And what about the editing process with that? I know we've talked about this before. You didn't bring it up today, but it's my understanding that on writer's block, you actually did like the initial layout. And then
Yeah.
you kind of passed it off to Jack Geronimo, who you've worked with many times and I've worked with many times. And he kind of did the fine tuning. Was that a similar process on Katie's Skin, or
This one I just cut myself because I just
you
wanted
did?
it. Yeah, because it didn't have montages. It was
Hmm.
pacing. I knew exactly how I wanted it to be. We didn't have a scripty.
Hmm.
It would have been like irresponsible to pass it off to an editor and to expect it to be the way that I wanted it to be. And
Hmm.
like Katie's Skin, I wanted done in 2 months. And so like we shot it, and then within 3 months of shooting it, it was being submitted. It
Oh,
was like
really?
done.
That
Yeah.
was a quick turnaround.
Yeah, 1 month of picture lock. So I just cut it, like picture locked it, and then worked with Ryan Blake on score, worked with Ben LeBeau on sound design,
Benny,
Benny,
love him.
and then who else did we work
Actually, I love Ryan too. I wanted to
Oh,
comment on the score. The
and
score
then
was
Sam.
fantastic.
Oh my god, yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
It was nice. It almost felt like from start to finish, he just kind of, I don't know, his score just, it felt it.
Yeah.
He was like right there,
There's an
and
emotional like weight to the music and her experience that is like disjointed from the reality of the situation.
but also like strangely beautiful.
That's the whole idea.
Like
That
you
is
almost
the
feel like you
it
through
doesn't read as a
his.
horror. It doesn't read as a horror,
It
and
reads in a horror in the way that like the opening to Rosemary's Baby reads like a horror. Like I don't know if you remember it, but it's this beautiful like sweeping landscape shot. Like you're on a tower and it's going around the city, and she's kind of got like this lullaby playing in the background, and you at once understand that it's like she's singing to a newborn, but also it's so disquieting, like uncomfortable, and that's what I felt with Ryan's score. Like from the start to the end, you're like, okay, this drives the story, but like based on what I'm seeing, I'm also like strangely empathetic to the
yes,
main, if I may, villain.
yes,
it's like, okay, I kind of see where
The
you're coming from.
anti-hero.
The anti-hero. You're like, oh shit.
You're
Like,
with them though. You're like, fuck these other people. Yeah, just kill them.
yeah, I didn't feel that way at the end. I was like, holy shit, I really hope this goes somewhere else, but it makes perfect sense the way it ended. And I have no problems with it. But, I just love Rosario.
Good people die in
Good
horror
people
movies.
die
That's
in
like-
horror movies, and that's the way
They
it's
don't
gotta
deserve
go.
it, but also like I understand why they had to die.
But like also at the same time with Rosario's character, I mean, given his opening line and the way he delivers it, you're almost like, maybe you should die.
Exactly. Like if I'm with her,
it's like, yeah,
it's
like,
like
you
you're
really
giving
just
me
went there over dinner.
You're giving me every reason. Like you're not wrong to say that. Like clearly,
Of course not.
Clearly, the relationship like isn't like perfect.
Yeah, we got to spice it up a little bit. But
like,
good Christ, man, we are having chicken, and like it is nice.
It's the context of when he delivers that with what she's doing in the next scene that it's just like everybody laughed in the theater, which is like exactly what you want. It's like this moment of like, oh, we're not taking ourselves too seriously.
Not too seriously,
you know.
And it's fun. Yeah, the whole thing, start to finish, was very pleasantly fun.
Cool.
I had a good time with it.
Hell yeah.
I want to talk about one specific shot. I'm not going to give anything away, but there's a shot of two individuals, and I wanted to ask you about that. Did you end up doing like a split screen for that to make that happen?
Yeah. So Sam.
Yep. Sam Triplet.
Yes.
You're still working with Sam.
Of course, dude. He's great. Yeah.
He's the
So I
man.
hired him for a couple of commercial projects.
Cool.
Yeah, he's great.
And he got involved on that one specialty shot, huh?
That shot and there's another shot.
I know the shot you're talking about. I assumed that was breakaway glass.
It was.
It was.
But there's also just some stuff that happens to his face as he's falling. It's subtle. We dialed it way back, but like it's there. And it's
Sam
like
got
quick.
on that.
It's like quick bruising and a shard of glass. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. That's awesome, man. That's really awesome.
Yeah. You wouldn't see it. That's awesome that you didn't see it because it was like
I didn't. No, I didn't.
Because you were focused on the glass smashing.
Well, yeah, I mean, coming from the film industry, you understand that that was done one of two ways. That's either, breakaway glass that's not going to affect anybody if it actually hits them and smashes, or you did that
I have some funny videos of the takes that we went through.
You'll have to share those with me.
Yeah.
Or or maybe we could post some of them, in relation to this episode.
There's a couple that didn't break, and I'm just like off camera. Like I black out sometimes when I'm directing, and I'm just like, fuck him, hit him like you mean it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and he's just like sitting there just like off of like a dead hit, just like, like a hit that doesn't break like hurts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You brought up something that I'd like to ask you more about. I mean, we've talked to a bunch of filmmakers on the podcast so far, and having worked with you a number of times, I've seen you get in that blackout mood where it's like you've got blinders on, and I don't mean that as a negative thing. I actually think that's a compliment. Like, how do you put yourself into that headspace? Does the project just like get you to go there, or is that something you consciously have to do where it's like, no, like this is where my focus needs to be, this is what
I think it's like a little bit of both.
do.
Like I think there's like a pressure thing of like having to deliver and being there and everything building up and being like, this is the time, there's no other time, like we can't make this up.
Mm-hmm.
That just is like, okay, like this is what we're doing. Like, I've thought so much about this, I've spent so much energy into it that like now I can just dump and just like move,
I do.
But yeah, I definitely like black out.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen it. Like,
and it's not even that like I'm like yelling or anything like that. It's just like I'm just moving.
No, I've never seen you run a set through, yelling or anything like that. So, kind of juxtaposing writer's block versus Katie's skin, writer's block required a lot of takes. Mainly because you were trying to do very technical things by way of zoom and the dolly, and we had the the flip, so there was a lot going on there. What was Katie's skin like? Was that
same,
a lot of takes?
Lots of takes. Yeah.
How'd the actors respond to that? Were they game for it? Did you find that their performances either got better or did they vary?
Yep.
Yeah,
I think I think they got better.
Yeah,
for sure.
And the actors were game for it. They liked
they
playing.
were game for it. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
I think they knew what they were getting into.
Sure.
Yeah. And there was only like a couple, like I was very specific about a couple moments. Like you have to kind of recognize the moments that you're going to put time into and the moments that like aren't worth the time that you can kind of get away with. So I would spend the time on the moments that I knew like needed to be right, and then the other moments were like, that's great, like that passes, like that's great, that's you know what I mean. But
Yeah.
like this one has to be like perfect.
How long was that shoot? Did you say?
2 days. So we did like one. I think it was like two, like one 10-hour day and like one like 14-hour day.
Were they day proper, or was that like all day for night? Like, did you black out the windows, or did you actually film it at night?
Both of those were in the winter, so I think we started shooting at like 6 o'clock. Like, I think the dining room scene, like the upstairs, was from. I think we got there at 4. We shot from like 6 to like 12:30.
That's not bad.
No, because we had a lot of food to cook.
Fair enough.
That's what took us the most time, was like food continuity and air frying the chicken
Yeah.
so it would be crispy.
Yeah.
I brought my air fryer.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did.
Hell yeah.
I knew we were gonna be showing close-ups of it, and it had to be like
Had to look perfect.
it was sound driven, so it couldn't be like just like soggy chicken.
Sure. Do you mind if I ask, like, all in, what did that one cost you, like, to produce?
It was like 2,000 between Rosario and I.
Hell yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's really great.
yeah,
You got a solid little short that looks pretty fucking not $2,000.
yeah. I mean, that's not including submissions. Like with submissions, like film submissions, I think we got to like 4,
Okay.
which
So
is
you
like
submitted it to a lot of
I
festivals.
think like 40 or something, and then we pay for a poster and like some sound design and mixing and stuff like that. So like there were some like expenses paid for.
hmm
Um,
Do you enjoy the festival circuit?
I love that. Yeah,
You do.
yeah.
Again, it's mixed bag across all the filmmakers that we have on here about whether they like the film, film the festival like distribution route, or we have some filmmakers who are engaging just strictly through YouTube or Instagram, and
No, I think I just believe in like theater experience and like
Mhm.
being around other people, and I think that people who are like me like want to like go and celebrate the work after it, and it's not necessarily like I'm going here to get a deal. It's like I'm going here to meet like other like-minded people who just did the same thing this year across the country, to know like I'm not crazy and there's
Sure.
other people out there like me. And then also like who were the good people in their movie?
Mm.
Like I went to
Can I work with them eventually?
exactly. So I went to CineQuest, which was like the most prestigious film festival that I got into, which
Was
is
that
in
for Writer's Block?
yeah,
Okay.
which like I was like looking at that compared to the other films, I was like, yeah, I don't deserve to be in here at all. But there were like some sweet filmmakers, and one of them, Sam Dunning, who is a super talented filmmaker, lives in New York, was in a feature out there that won. He was in like 2 features actually out there.
Is he an actor?
Yeah, he's an
Okay.
actor. And like, they had a great like networking filmmaker lounge. Like we hit it off. And then Stu Valberg was doing a film. We connected at Boston International. And we were
Mhm.
like, let's make something together. Like he's new to being back to Boston. Like he was in New York, I think, for a bit.
Okay.
And he showed me this script that Jason Tostovan, who runs the Nightmares Festival, had written, that he's collaborating with.
Sure.
And I see the character, I'm like, dude, I know the guy. And it was Sam Dunning, and like I showed him, and it like was no question. It was like, yep, Sam Dunning's the guy. And like
Yeah.
came up, did the thing, and it's like that's why you go to the festivals, like just to network, because like you can't just reach out to someone like that if you don't meet them or you don't have drinks with them.
No. That's awesome though. So did you already film that project?
Yeah, already shot it.
Already shot it. How long did you take film that one? And Stewart directed it?
Stewart directed it. Jason wrote it. I think it was like 2 days of shooting and then a half day of inserts.
Hell yeah.
Like very specific, like car shots.
Yeah. Did you do any car rigs?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
That was a fun day when we did that.
It
for
was.
Odessa though. That was a good time.
I know.
So let me ask you this. I mean, what else are you working on? It's hard to imagine, given everything we've talked about so far, that you don't have something else in the pipeline. Are you able to talk about whatever you might be up to next as a director?
Yeah. So next film is Gimme.
Okay.
So co-wrote that with Aiden Payne. Aiden just actually won Popcorn Frights for his film Sound of Fear.
Okay.
Which is fantastic.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's like a great film, and it's really cool that we're working together on the next one because we both just like were in that festival and like but so yeah,
Is that how you two met, or you met
no,
before
so
that?
we met on 44. So
Okay.
he was brought on as a producer on 44, and we just like kind of hit it off, like just talking logistics, and we were just
Sure.
like, I was like, oh, dude, you know what they're asking, I know what they're asking, and like we like felt like we were very much on the same page of like everything of what was going on.
Cool.
Just hit it off, like went skiing and snowboarding a couple times like this past winter, and we're just like, let's like make something.
Let's make a movie.
Yeah, let's make it short. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
similar thing to writer's block.
Yep.
And you know, like the script kept getting like bigger and bigger.
Mhm.
Prosthetics were written in, like monsters were written in,
And just
so,
to be clear, we're talking about Gimme, right?
talking about Gimme.
Okay.
So like Gimme, we were gonna shoot like earlier in the year, and it got pushed. Like
Okay.
he got on Walking Dead, and so he wasn't available anymore.
Mhm.
And also, it was just like things weren't ready. Like we don't have a dreidel. We don't have like these things that like we need to like make this like film type deal.
Mhm. Are you able to kind of give the log line without giving too much away?
Well, I
Like,
just said dreidel, yeah. So
I know you. That's why I pounced on it at
Yeah,
the beginning of
so,
this
yeah,
interview.
I
You're
just-
like,
I-
"Don't let me say dreidel." Well, you
Blew
said
it.
dreidel. So, what's the log line? Give us an idea.
yeah, so it's like it's
I would imagine horror.
folklorian horror.
Okay.
You know, not
Witch lighthouse type vibes.
yes, like
Yep.
not it sets you up to be like a holiday horror piece. But the thing about like Hanukkah,
Mhm.
which is like
the other word
holiday-
you didn't want to say.
I mean,
We're
you
just
say
going-
dreidel, you say Hanukkah. Like
We're
it's
just going all in. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just at that point, right?
Yeah.
So like, you know, as soon as you sit down to watch something and it's a holiday film, there's expectations, and horror is all just about like subverting expectations. And so I'm leaning into this holiday that actually like isn't religious at all. Like
Mhm.
Hanukkah is hilarious. Like it's not in the Torah. It's
Mhm.
not like a religious holiday. There's like 3 different books of people who like claim Hanukkah to be something, and like nobody can agree on
Mhm.
what happened. So like, you know, perfect thing to exploit. And so doing this short, exploiting that concept, you know, with like this relationship between a grandfather and a grandchild, and just like their love and coming together. And the question is like, what is greater? What's more powerful, tradition or religion?
Okay.
And that's kind of the concept, the theme, which I feel strongly about. Like I feel like, you know, the more science, the more we know about the world, like the less like religious people are, which is fine.
Mhm.
But I think that the deep rooted like thing about religion, at least in Judaism, that has always resonated with me is it's not about like God necessarily. It's about like coming together
Community.
as a family, community, which I think we're losing as we are losing sight of, you know, religion and just being like, you know, above it. I don't think that you have to be religious, but I think that you could be traditional. And I think there's this happy balance that people aren't exploring yet. And so that's kind of what I explore in the film.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So when do you plan on going into? It sounds like you're in some variation of pre-production. When do you plan on going into production?
21st through the 23rd of September.
Coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Coming up. Hell
Mhm.
yeah. We're gonna have to have you back on the podcast once you've wrapped everything up and get a sense for, you know, how Katie's Skin's received, and get a sense for how this Gimme is received.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So if anybody listening wants to find you and your work, what's available? Where can they find you?
Schloss Films on Instagram. Where can they find the work? DM me. Unfortunately, like writer's block is still in the festival circuit, so you can't like I can't put it online at the moment. But I will send you a screener.
Guys, get at Steve Schloss here. DM him. These are movies you're going to want to check out. Keep an eye out for everything else that he's doing. And thanks very much for being on the podcast, dude. It was really nice having you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Good
Matt.
talking to you.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. Catch you on the next one. Thank you.